right? So the way it's articulated is, well, these primitive people who accept animism believe that rocks have souls, right? So the interesting thing about it is that the belief that humans have souls is just as much a belief as rocks having souls. So religion in and of itself is, for many of us, just something that we're constructing.
Ęgbę, and welcome to another episode of TalkingIfa with me, Babalawo Salako. In today's episode, I wanted to discuss a comment that I received on a video that I posted a few weeks ago with my son. And I brought in Dr. Adewuyi Mason, a Babalawo that I've known for a long time and a good friend, to discuss it. Before we get started, please like, share, and subscribe so that we can touch as many people as possible with this information. With that being said, let's talk.
Greetings. I'm Babalawo Salako. I was initiated as a priest of Ifa and Obatala in Nigeria in 2006, and I've been practicing the Ifa Orisha religion for over 30 years now. My mission is simple: to help those who are new to the religion or lost in the religion. So if that's you, then buckle up and join me. This is Talking Ifa.
Ęgbę, and welcome to another episode of Talking Ifa with me, Babalawo Salako. So again, we're here today with Baba Adewuyi Mason. He's a very esteemed scholar from that University of Georgia here. Babalawo, I've known for many years, so he is very, very knowledgeable. So it's going to be a blessing for you to hear this discussion today. So let's get started. So what I wanted to talk about today was a comment that I received from one of my episodes, and I'm not going to read the name of the person, but let me see what the comment was. He says, "Why do you refer to Ifa as a faith and a religion? Ifa is animism, not a religion or something you have faith in. I'm confused." So I just wanted to kind of talk about that, because maybe there might be some other people out there who might be confused.
Well, that's so the interesting thing is that there are some things in there that could be right, that the commenter is making, and but there are lots of assumptions built in. One, we don't exactly know which meaning, and I'm purposely saying meaning and not definition, which meaning or collection of ideas and impressions and motivations that are connected to the terms faith and religion that the commenter is using. Because depending on which position we're taking with that, then the commenter could be right. But the central thing is that the term religion is a contested term. There is no one way to talk about it. There is no one way to think about it. And what we do know is that over time in the Western world and Western scholarship, that people have used the term religion as a particular term that only referred to certain religions that met the same types of criteria that Christianity met. Mm-hmm. And so if it was outside of what Christianity was, then it was not considered to be religion. And so several sets of terms were devised to talk about what these non-Western religions were. Mm. All of the terms that were used were pejorative, or some kind of way to talk about so-called primitive peoples.
Right.
Animism was one such term.
Mm-hmm.
So your commenter definitely appears to be conflating the idea of religion and faith together, which is also not only a very Christian perspective, but it's a very recent Christian perspective. So faith normally connotes the idea of some type of internal, connectivity, almost ideas around spirituality, but it's something that is individualistic.
Right.
When even amongst most of, Christian history, one's religion was communal, like it is amongst many other groups of people around the planet. So this commenter seems to be conflating those two terms as if you can talk about faith and religion as exactly the same thing. Faith also tends to connote the idea of believing in a set of doctrines, a set of creeds that you won't find in every religious tradition that you come across.
Right.
Right. So some of my, colleagues would even argue that religion itself doesn't exist, that it is something that is created by the scholar to have something to study, that the participants in these traditions are participating in a whole swath of things that the scholar is deciding which of those things that person is participating in we're going to call religion. Okay, so as an example, it's a wild example, but hopefully it functions. So let's use church as a place for us to go and participate in religion. Does the act of driving to church, is that a religious activity? Do we bring that as a part of our area of study? Do we now study the ways in which people drive or turn, or do they put their blinkers on or not as a function of religion because they're headed to a part of the religious activity or the central component? The question is, what sets of actions are we going to include that we're going to consider to be religion? Okay, so scholars can pick whatever they want. And we can then come and decide that these sets of activities are religion and these other ones are not. We consider these to be secular activities. So religion in and of itself is, for many of us, just something that we're constructing. Most people's lived experience is that they have many things that they would consider to be a part of their religious experience that we don't call religion, particularly in the Western world where we're primarily looking at creeds and belief systems. But that tends to exclude things like practice-based traditions, of which many African traditions would fall under. The Yoruba tradition in particular. These are practice-based traditions where having a set of doctrines that one has to articulate to everyone so that everyone knows what you're practicing is not a significant part of the tradition. So your commenter is making lots of assumptions about the relationships between the terms religion, the terms faith, and now we have this other term that your commenter uses, animism. Well, your commenter is juxtaposing animism against religion. And it's a fair juxtaposition because the term religion was used both as a general term to refer to all phenomenon that can be a part of the spiritual world or something along those lines. Or it was used as a particular term to refer to only those people who met these more specific criteria. So you had animism, religion, and then a particular kind of religion, monotheism. But animism was also a particular kind of religion. Right. So you can't extract it.
Before we move on with the podcast, I want to tell you about something I know you're going to love. Discover Ashe Life. Get your high quality t-shirts and long sleeves featuring powerful Orisha designs like Oshun, Yemoja, Shango, and many more. They come available in multiple colors. These are comfortable fits made to wear every day. And this is more than just clothing. Ashe Life is about walking in blessings, embracing your path, and carrying that divine energy with you. So visit AsheLife.com today and wear your Ashe. From the family behind TalkingIfa, Ashe.
Right? So now it was a particular hierarchy created to show that Africans and indigenous American people were primitive. Right? Because if you were at the upper end of this spectrum, the superior end, then
quote unquote,
right? Then you would not, you wouldn't believe that other things around you can be alive, right? Mm-hmm. So the way it's articulated is, well, these primitive people who accept animism believe that rocks have souls, right? So the interesting thing about it is that the belief that humans have souls is just as much a belief as rocks having souls.
Right.
So this idea that these people are lesser because they may believe that rocks have souls or function from the perspective that rocks have souls, that makes them primitive, in that Christians functioning from the perspective that humans have souls is somehow superior.
Right.
So, so your commenter is pulling from a long colonial history of ascribing those terms to African traditions, whether they're aware of it or not.
Right.
Okay? And so we have to be clear about what it is we're talking about.
Right.
Now, I started off by saying that from a certain perspective, your commenter could be right. So in the way that your commenter could be right is that because Yoruba tradition is practice-based and not faith-based, then it is better not to call it a faith tradition, right? Because again, faith is about usually internal things for the person. Faith is usually something that's individualistic. And so it's not something that is usually as communal as Yoruba tradition tends to function as. So because of that, your commenter could be right, that it would be a misnomer to consider Orisha tradition, Yoruba tradition, Ifa as a faith. Can we consider it a religion? Well, we've had, in addition to your commenter, all sorts of people who have been arguing about whether or not Ifa is a spirituality as opposed to a religion. And the more I would dig into the debates along those lines, the less specificity you get on what someone is meaning about spirituality and religion. The biggest set of circumstances they tend to focus on is whether or not it is organized. So they considered religion to be organized and spirituality to be personal. If they're using that rather crude way of talking about it, then there would be the people who say that Yoruba tradition, Orisha tradition, Ifa tradition are not spirituality would be correct, because those traditions, they have to be both communal and personal. But spirituality tends to be only personal and not communal at all. But they would be wrong to argue that spirituality is not organized.
Right.
Right? So over time, even when someone develops their own spiritual system, their own way of understanding how they connect with whatever spiritual forces or no spiritual forces, humanistic forces, however they connect with whatever they're connecting to, they organize it in a fashion. They create hierarchy. They create the ways in which they connect, the ways in which they know other people are not connected. They create a organization. Now, while they may not create a formal institution where other people have to come into it in order to be members, the moment it shifts from being one person to two people, we have the rudiments of an institution. So most people are making this distinction between spirituality and religion in very, very weird ways.
So how would they consider an ile, so to speak? Yeah.
Right. Well, see, now that would inherently be a religion because it is organized. There's more than, now those people may feel that even though they are participants there, how they practice themselves, how they understand things is uniquely their own.
You mean
And
the individual members?
the individual
of
members of the ile.
Okay.
Right? So those people may go, oh, well, this is still my spirituality that I am now practicing in concert with other people. And this is where it gets all fuzzy because you're practicing your spirituality in concert with other people. Therefore, it's communal and there's organization, there's hierarchy. It's religion.
Right.
By most definitions, most people's use of the term religion.
Right. So how would you, just for the listeners to clarify, in the beginning you talked about scholars defining religion. Most people don't see that part of it. How would you distinguish scholars from priests or government officials, say the Council of Nicaea or whoever starting it? How would you delineate between when you say scholar versus them?
So, I suppose when I'm referring to scholars, I'm thinking about from the late 1700s till today, when the idea of studying the thing that we're naming as religion became quite in vogue.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we couldn't go as far back, even though we can consider those people to be scholarly. But I'm talking about religion scholars who specifically felt they were studying religion as a phenomenon that we can apply universally across the world.
Right, and that's when he introduced terms like animism.
Correct.
Right. So do you think that term started out being a negative term to, down people, you think they were just trying to explain what they saw at first, and then it evolved into?
No, it was always pejorative, because the European scholars who were studying it were sure that what Christianity was doing was religion, and so if you use that as your standard, and then you valorize this as the highest and the best, then anyone who's not doing what you're doing is doing the worst.
Right.
So animism was a way of trying to describe it, sure, but it was also as a way of talking about these people as being primitive.
Right.
So we can use this as a way of thinking about this.
But first, I want to encourage you to align your 2026 with Ifa Orisha tradition. The 2026 Ifa Days calendar and planner are here. So you can track your Itado Gun days, the 4-day week, the sacred Orisha days to keep your spiritual path in focus. This is perfect for organizing your rituals, your growth, your daily life, all in one place. So I strongly encourage you to secure your Ifa Orisha history today. Get yours now at talkingifa.carrd.co. talkingifa.carrd.co.
The way we study religion tends to focus on the relationships that human beings have with spiritual or divine persons. Okay? But that's an assumption, and we don't have to do that. And so, because that's the way Christianity is situated, so now you go to other people's traditions and you say, how do you relate with spiritual forces and divine persons? And that's the lens I want to use to study everything that I come across.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that you can come from Orisha tradition, and you say something like, no Orisha is more important than mother. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, mother, in this conceptualization, is a physical person. And we've just said that mother is superior to the divine forces. So would it not then be more sensible to, if I wanted to study Yoruba religion, to study the relationship between children and mothers?
Right.
Because that would be internal to the way the tradition understands itself.
Right.
But because Christianity functions in this particular way, and the scholars who were studying it understood this to be religion, they apply that same lens and they expect to see this everywhere. They also start first from ideas around doctrines and dogmas and creeds. Well, if I'm saying that Yoruba tradition is practice-based, then, and why don't I define what I mean by practice-based? Give a good example of it. You can find a priestess of Oshun in Oshobo who subscribes to the idea that Olodumare is indistinguishable from the Christian God, doing a ritual alongside an Oshun priest who does not subscribe to that idea and instead subscribes to the idea that Olodumare may be the supreme being, but is not omnipotent or omniscient and all of those types of things. Those two people can be engaged in exactly the same ritual, performed in exactly the same way, and still be considered to be a part of the religious tradition. So you're not excluded from your internal belief system as a practitioner.
Right.
Whereas in Christianity, you are primarily judged by what set of beliefs, doctrines, or creeds you hold.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone says, I believe Jesus to be God, is working alongside someone who says, I do not believe Jesus to be God. I believe he was, sent by God, but not God. Those people would not consider themselves to be a part of the same religious tradition because they hold these different beliefs, which are different,
right,
to some diametrically opposed. So, but this is different from practice-based traditions where the beliefs are secondary or tertiary to the practices one is engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
So, so this is what I mean by a practice-based tradition. So, for the most part, our people who are making distinctions between whether or not they're in an elay, or between religion and faith, or between what kinds of things they're engaged in, it's important to know what frame of reference we're coming from.
Right.
And the scholars coming from Europe originally were studying primarily doctrinal-based traditions.
Right.
Even in the U.S. legal system, you can't be a religion without having a congregation, because that is the way Christianity functions.
Right.
So if you have a tradition that is primarily about people interacting in long-term ways, in terms of maybe festivals together, or getting together for Itadogun to chant together, but it's not congregational in the way that Christianity is, where one is seated in pews and being given a sermon. What do people who come to Itadogun consider themselves? Congregants.
Mm-hmm.
They may not. Because it's a free association.
Right.
So Christianity is also census taking. You're now a member of this congregation. You have certain obligations to perform, whereas we can come together and chant poems together on a certain Itadogun, but we are not, but we don't share the same doctrinal ideas. We don't view ourselves as having any obligations to the other with regard to anything. Right. Whether or not I come this one or no other ones in the year, can be, people can have freedom to associate or not associate.
Right.
Congregations are not like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're also self-policing. Right? You didn't show up to church today. And so people start making comments. Well, that's not the same thing for people who are not a part of a congregation. So we have, these assumptions about what religion looks like, mm-hmm. because we're thinking about what Christianity looks like.
Right. So in that sense, it would be like a colonial mindset.
Oh, absolutely.
And so what would you think about somebody who said, if they put it like in a triangle, if they said the top of the umbrella is belief in some spiritual or term for religion, then underneath you could have faith on this side or practice on this side, but overall religion is belief in some kind of spiritual force or entity.
There are definitely some who describe religion as a set of beliefs. But, as I mentioned, the practitioners, an example I gave about the Oshun priest, you can have a third one who has no distinctive, decided beliefs. They function from the idea that these practices work. Now, we can say, do they believe in these practices? Well, I would consider to be an underlying assumption, because we have underlying assumptions about the world that we don't consider as a part of our belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we don't say that as a part of my doctrine, floors exist, and that I believe in floors, that when I walk into a house, floors exist. We don't establish that as a doctrine in our belief system if we function from belief systems. That becomes an underlying, assumption about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times in practice-based traditions, while they don't have stated beliefs, they may have underlying assumptions about the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think those rise to the level of belief because they're not organized in that kind of fashion.
So the last thing, just for people who kind of new to understand this. So for me, sometimes I think things are in terms of degrees versus absolute. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about faith versus practice, what do you think about in terms of practice? Doesn't mean you don't practice without faith. You have to have a certain level of faith that what you're doing has some kind of effect that's going to work for you. So how do you distinguish the belief that if I go get this divination or reading, or if I do this Ęgbę, I believe it's going to work? Mm-hmm. To me, that also involves faith to a certain level. So I don't think it's, when you say there's different type of faith in Christianity versus what we do, we don't do it with totally no faith or belief.
So you're using the term differently.
Belief or faith?
Well, you're using faith in one way of talking about my set of internal beliefs, and then you're also using faith in the sense that that I have trust that something will happen. Mm-hmm. Right? So those can be distinguished. But I'm not arguing that there is never any internal belief system amongst practice-based people. What I am saying is that it is not a requirement.
Oh, right.
To practice-based traditions to have these internal beliefs around how the world functions.
Okay.
You can have a belief that, or a trust that something is going to happen because you've done it and you've seen it function over time. That tends to, for many people, move into the realm of knowledge or surety about the activities. Mm-hmm. But none of these ideas about faith, belief, and practice are unique to the thing that we call religion. So I'm going to assume, Baba, that you're not a nuclear physicist.
That's a good assumption. Yeah.
But you have a tremendous amount of faith and belief that if you turn on your light switch, that the lights will come on.
Yeah, well.
Right? So you can have that without that being a part of religion at all. Right?
Right.
There are some scholars who study politics or Americanism as a form of religion, because it would have all the features of the way Christianity functions. You would have a sacred text, right, that we would call the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You would have priests who would be your various political functionaries who are capable of translating all of the congregants who would be the citizenry's connectivity to the sacred doctrine, because they're the ones who are the specialists who explain it, who administer it, right? And you can even say that there are some nebulous ideas around the divinity or spirituality of things like freedom and justice, and and then we have iconography of justice as a woman holding scales with a blindfold. So we could even say that this is our idol or icon for this particular entity that functions within this religious political system, mm-hmm. right? And there's tremendous, and we can even see in the moment of today where people are saying things that are happening with immigration, with attacks on DEI, that this isn't our country. This is not the country I believe in, right? So in those instances, these are people who have a tremendous amount of faith and belief in these ideals that we could argue is no distinction between that and what we term religion.
Well, the one thing I would ask, then in that case, then the one distinction I would say is the spirit part.
I added spirits.
Well, if you define justice as spirit, yeah.
Well, there is instances in the Hebrew Bible where the idea of wisdom is personified. The whole idea around Jesus for Christians is that Jesus is the Word, and the Word was made flesh. So these abstract notions, like justice, can indeed be spiritual and divine beings.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess part of that too would be, and I'm not going to go there in terms of some people say that, the whole thing was Jesus that was created, and other people go and they may go to a river and they do some kind of spiritual work and they actually can get possessed by the spirit or that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, it's right. You're right. And all that. I agree with that.
Now, you can have religion without spiritual being. That was part of the point I was making about the mother being more significant than the original. You can have religion. There's been debate for a long time about Buddhism.
Buddhism, right.
About whether or not it falls underneath religion or religious philosophy or a way of life.
Right.
But religion doesn't require the belief in any kinds of divine or spiritual beings in order for it to function as religion.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a lot for this here today. Great information. But thank you very much for joining today and going over that topic. And we could go on forever on that topic. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. So, in summary, is Ifa a real religion? Is Ifa animism? Or is it a real religion? In my opinion, both of these terms are colonial terms. They're terms to deride and degrade and to categorize things in the way they wanted to categorize them. So therefore, when you say religion, that term religion can mean all spiritual practices, and even outside of spiritual practices, there are people that say consumerism is a religion, or this is the new religion, or that's the new religion. But in general, if you're talking about religions that are tied to spiritual practices, there were many of those around long before the so-called religions of the book, including Christianity, Islam, they came later. So Ifa in general is a religion. Well, they call Hinduism a religion. They call it a world religion. It doesn't have a book like a Bible, but it is very similar to Ifa. So if Hinduism is a legitimate religion, why wouldn't Ifa be a legitimate religion? I don't believe in letting other people define what we do. But in terms of what it is for you, that's up to you. I don't think it's important whether you want to call it a religion or you say it's a spiritual practice. Spiritual practices can also be a religion if you do something religiously. I practice Ifa religiously. I practice Ifa daily. So for me, Ifa is a religion. But if you feel more comfortable feeling like, well, I don't want to categorize it as a religion because that compares it to other world or I should say government-sponsored religions, then that's fine, because at the end of the day, this is a practice-based religion, or you could call it a practice-based spiritual practice. We have traditions, we have ceremonies, we have rituals, we have beliefs, we have stories, we have books. There are the whole Ifa corpus or you can say multiple books or one large book, but because it's oral, then you may say, oh, well, it was an oral tradition, so therefore it's not a formal book, so you wouldn't categorize it as having a book. But we do have our own literature. We have our sacred literature in Ifa also. So therefore, for me, I choose to call it a religion. If you don't want to call it a religion, that's on you. But if you want to demean it and use the term animism as a derogatory term and try to say, oh, you're nothing but animism, well, then you have a colonial way of thinking in saying that, then that's fine if that's what you want to do. But for me, Ifa is a religion. It's a religion. It's the traditional religion or the original religion of the Yoruba people of Southwest Nigeria or West Africa. And that's the way I choose to see it. So hopefully this episode cleared up some things for you, helped you look at things a little differently. And thank you very much for supporting us. And again, we're trying to get out as much information to as many people as possible and to assist and help people and guide them on this journey in this Ifa traditional religion of the Yoruba people. So please like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you have ideas for other things you want me to cover on this podcast, please leave them in the comments. And in the description of this, I have my contact information if you want to reach out directly to me. I also do consultations with people and one-on-ones, and I'll have links in the description there. I also work with other Babalawos and in my lineage and God brothers and God sisters, and so I can provide services there, whether it's hands of Ifa, whether it's divinations or readings, and other things. But I primarily want to be here also as an Ifa life coach. So I'm going to start a monthly mentoring program. The links to that also will be in the description below the video. I thank you in advance for your support. Ashe, 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 oh. Ireo.